Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast. Today, we're talking all about being a great second shooter. So let's get into it.
Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast with Raymond Hatfield, the podcast dedicated to helping you grow your photography skills. Raymond interviews the world's top photographers in their field to ask questions that will get you taking better photos today. Now, with you as always, husband, father, home brewer, LA Dodger fan, and Indianapolis wedding photographer, Raymond Hatfield.
Welcome back to this week's episode of the Beginner Photography Podcast. As always, I am Raymond Hatfield, and I am super excited to be here today. And I really want to share a story with you before we get on into this interview. So this past weekend, I shot a wedding, and it was a wedding at a venue that I had been to before. It's a very nice location, but it had been probably 2 years since I last shot a wedding at this venue, and since then it's like an old cathedral, old wooden, monolith. Like, this place is giant. But since the last time that I was there, they converted the lobby into a coffee shop, and they converted the east wing into a gym. So last time I was there, the only people who were in this entire place was the wedding party and the caterers and whatnot. But this time, tons and tons and tons of people, just everywhere, and that made it kind of not frustrating, but just you just had to deal with that extra element. And let me start before that. So the wedding that I shot this weekend actually strangely really fed my ego as a photographer, but was also incredibly humbling. So everybody at this wedding was they were happy, and they were just truly happy. Like, one of the reasons why I love shooting weddings is because it's generally like the happiest day of your life, barring children, graduating with like a major degree, like a huge accomplishment. It's one of the most important days of your life that you're going to remember. And generally people are very, very happy. But, sometimes there's family drama, sometimes there's, this, that, the other thing, poor planning, whatever it is. Sometimes there's an air of tenseness at weddings, but this wedding had none of that. Everybody was so happy, and everybody was just truly enjoying themselves and being there. And what was weird was that they went out of their way to appreciate me. Like, they're not there for me. Like, I'm not putting on a concert or anything. They're there for their friend or their family who's getting married, and yet everybody kept giving me compliments, which I thought was so strange. So strange. It was so foreign to me. The best man told me after we had taken all of the bridal party photos, he said, "I can tell that your photos are going to be great because you just make everybody feel so comfortable. I know that I'm not going to look awkward and stiff in your photos." And I thought, like, wow, that's a pretty big, compliment, especially because he had not seen a single photo. And then even later, the bride told me, after I did show her one of her photos, just from the back of the camera, right, the small 3-inch screen, she said, this was so weird. She said, "Raymond, I love this so much." And then she said, "You were made to do this for others. Thank you." And I was really, like, taken back. Like, I understand that this feels like I'm just, like, tooting my own horn here. And this isn't how I wanted this to come off, because that's it feels very awkward for me, and that's not what I'm trying to get at. That's not the point of this. But I was taken back at this because, and this is the story that I want to share with you, is because up until that point, I had been having a lot of internal doubt at this wedding. A lot. Like I said, I thought, oh, this is cake. I've been to this venue before. It's great. We're going to make some great things happen. I had showed up Now there's a coffee shop, there's a gym going on. The two places that I really wanted to take photos were off limits for a different event, which at the time I thought were for the was not for the wedding. Like, we were not allowed to go to these two extremely photogenic locations because of a different event going on. So suddenly there was, oh, well, what are we going to do about this? Before I had shown up, the bridesmaid's phone had died. So when I got there, I couldn't find the room that they were in. And you can't just go knocking on all these doors because now there's tons of people. The lighting was mixed and it was splotchy. And when I say it was mixed, it was like so mixed. Like, there was like an orange looking light that I had never encountered before in my life. Like, yellow, yes. Green, yes. Blue, yes. This color is, it's hideous, right? It's very splotchy. The ceilings are beautiful. They're like 15, 16 feet high, but because it's a really old building, there's like smoke detectors and sprinkler systems like 6 feet off the ground, and they're bright red and they're everywhere and you just can't avoid them. So again, as I'm saying, like, in my head, I was already facing this uphill battle, which never makes things easier. It just makes things much, much, much harder. Worrying, what am I going to do? I really like this couple. I really want to make something unique and great for them, but kind of my aces were taken away from me. But to hear, just two people go out of their way to tell me how much they appreciate how I was handling myself and the quality of the photos was just so humbling, because it reminded me how little wedding photography is about us. We get into wedding photography because we like photography and we want to take pictures and we want to make money. But the wedding photography isn't about us at all. It's not about having the best lens. It's not about having the best camera. It's not even about, paying $10 an hour to park, and, it's a really shady parking lot and you're still unsure that your car is going to be there and that it's probably going to get towed at the end of the wedding. It's not about that. These are things that you can't worry about, because a wedding is their day and they hired you. So the thing that you need to do is to check yourself at the door and do the best that you can. And you need to know that it won't be perfect. It won't. Timelines won't match up. The light is going to be bad. Your camera's autofocus might act up. You're never going to shoot a perfect wedding. But you can always shoot the best wedding that you can. And if you do that, then you will always be happy with your work. Speaking of being happy, I want to give a huge public shout out to Amanda Vickers for her 5-star iTunes review. Amanda said, I was honestly very skeptical about how I could learn photography from a podcast, since it's such a visual thing, but I walk away with new tips after each episode. The Beginner Photography Podcast has been such a great resource to me as a new photographer, and I'm so thankful to have found it. It's even great for binging old episodes, which I've been doing a lot lately. So Amanda, I am so glad that you are actually going back and listening to those past episodes. I really try to ask questions that are not topical. I try to get answers that will last the test of time and won't be obsolete after the new, Canon, Sony, Nikon DA9R7 Mark 7 comes out next week, or whatever it is. So thank you for not only listening to the show, Amanda, but for taking the time and learning, or I guess doing what you're actually learning and using it. So Amanda, again, thank you for your review. I truly appreciate that. So this week, I chat with a wedding photographer all about how to be a helpful second shooter for wedding photography that I know that you all are going to get a ton out of. It's a fun interview. It's a fun interview. But like always, I save a portion of the interview that is focused more on the business and photography, or the business of photography and making money with your camera for premium members. And this week, premium members are going to learn how much a second shooter gets paid, how to make your first opportunity to second shoot, and exactly where to find photographers willing to let you shoot with them, and exactly what to say, and what to look for in a contract to protect yourself and the main photographer when working together. It is great stuff in this interview. And if you want to hear the entire interview, you can hear all the actionable business advice from today's guest and past guests by becoming a premium member. So head over to beginnerphotographypodcast.com and click the premium membership button at the top to sign up today. So that is it. With that, let's go ahead and get on into this interview with Misha Wynn. Today's guest is Misha Wynn, a luxury wedding photographer from Dallas, Texas. Today, we are going to be talking about the relationship between a primary wedding photographer and the second shooter, and how to be the best second shooter that you can be. Misha, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah, there is... we kind of had a brief chat right before we started recording, and I was telling you that in the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group, I seem to get questions quite often about, second shooting, kind of like what is the role of second shooting, how much should I expect to be paid, do I edit the photos, that I'm shooting?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of questions that I have today, and I'm really excited to get into it with you. But before we get into the second shooter side of things, let's start with you. Can you tell me how you got started in photography in the first place?
Well, I originally started with wedding photography in 2008. And so I started with wedding photography. I didn't start with any other type. And my background is in architecture, so that's what I went to school with. But I really fell in love with all sorts of types of art, drawing, photography. But I was sitting at my desk one day, 2008, and said, I want to start a business. I want to start something that I love to do, that's fun, that I'll actually enjoy. And start looking through some magazines and figured I'd try photography. And I just thought, maybe I should try wedding photography. And so one thing about me is once I start something, then it's really hard for me to stop until I've completely gotten it. So
That's awesome.
So that's what I've done with wedding photography. And so I took off running with it, and it's been a great journey.
Oh, very good, very good. So when you first started, I kind of want to know about that first decision that you made, right? Because you thought, I got to do something else. This isn't fulfilling it, for me. So I got to find something. You found photography.
Yeah.
Tell me about that first camera purchase that you made, and when you went out and started taking those first photos, were they everything that you had hoped for right away?
No, not at all.
No?
So I went into a local camera store and bought like a beginner camera with the kit lens. So I had the 18 to 55 lens, and then 55 to 200 lens. And so, I didn't have a speed light or anything. And so I just went out and started taking pictures of friends and all of that. And what I noticed was my outdoor photos were fine, they were good. But when I actually had my first job as a photographer, the ballroom was pretty dark, and I went in, and I think we did the wedding for free. And I couldn't get my images right. And so I just kind of went back to the drawing board, did a lot more research, and then I bought speed lights, and then, eventually I upgraded. But the very first wedding I did was very scary because the images didn't come out the way that I thought that they would. And I didn't realize that I didn't have enough lighting. So, and, my camera wasn't really sufficient for, a dark ballroom or a dark setting. So it took a lot of practice, a lot of free sessions, a lot of dragging my kids out to different settings to take pictures, and friends. I remember one Christmas, I have a friend, and at the time she had been married for several years, and I convinced her to put her wedding dress back on in December, and let's go out to the park and take some photos. So I had I guess I had a lot of support. And so with a lot of research, I was able to, and training, I was able to figure out what exactly I needed to get the look that I wanted.
Yeah, that makes sense. So when you first got that camera, did you just throw it in auto, or did you know that manual was the way to go, or how was that progression for you?
No, I threw it in auto. And so, I kept reading and kept researching, and then I went to Aperture Priority, and
Hmm.
I worked from there for a little bit. And then, it wasn't until I really upgraded my camera to where I really just went into manual and started, taking some classes and, just going to workshops and really learning how to work to get everything to work in manual.
Right, right.
Yeah.
What was the hardest part, would you say, when you went to go learn manual? What was the hardest part to really understand?
Well, the tricky thing, which I think some photographers struggle with, is the ISO, because
Hmm.
you don't want the images to be grainy, and that's what you hear. So you don't want to turn it, turn the ISO up too much, because you don't want the images to be grainy, but then your images are dark. And so it's kind of that scary, it's that scary thing, that
Yeah,
scary
of
feeling
course.
that you have, not knowing exactly which settings um, to set. And so I was really scared. So I
About
would try.
ISO?
Yes.
Hmm.
Yeah, so I think that was my biggest fear. So,
Hmm.
but like I said, I did a lot of free sessions, would take friends out in different settings and different rooms and test out what really worked and what gave me the look that I was wanting.
Yeah. So now let me ask you a question. Now that you've been
Okay.
shooting since 2008,
Uh-huh.
have you ever had a client or somebody who you photographed look at your photos and be like, "Whoa, these are grainy"? Has any
No.
non-photographer ever said that to you?
No.
No. It's these stories that we
You're
put in
right.
our
No.
head.
Yeah.
We get so worked up about these things,
Yeah,
and
we do.
yet, it seems like the people who the photos are for
Yeah.
never seem to notice. But
It
interesting.
seems like a lot of times, especially with weddings, they're more worried about the moment. You
Yeah.
capturing the moment. Sometimes if the image isn't exactly perfect, they sometimes they love the moment.
Yeah, yeah, you're willing to what's it called? Have suspended disbelief? Is that
Hmm.
where you're able to look past something that isn't ideal because another part is preferable? That was a terrible
Yeah,
definition. I
I
apologize
know
for
it. I know it. I know
that.
where you're going.
So then, talk to me a little bit about the moment side of things. Because if you started off and you're like, I'm going to get into weddings,
Hmm.
moment is obviously very
Hmm.
important. In fact, one thing I say on the podcast very often is that moment matters most, right?
Yeah,
And it's for
yeah.
that exact reason that you were just saying. I've never had anybody say to me like, "No, I take that back." I've had one bride say this photo's a little too grainy, and in her defense, it was definitely too grainy.
Uh-huh.
Um, but aside from that, nobody's ever said anything like that. So how do you I don't know, train your eye or your brain to anticipate those potential moments?
Honestly, I think it really goes back to uh, you know, my architecture training. And a lot of with architecture, you have to be really particular and really critical of every little thing,
Hmm.
of every little piece of a building, every little aspect of a building. And so I think it comes from that time. And so when it comes to second shooters, that's been something that's been really hard to teach. Um, but for me, it's more so sitting back, waiting for the moment, anticipating the moment. And the more weddings that I shoot, the more I know what's coming and what to anticipate.
Right, right. Yeah.
So it's not just shooting a bunch of random images with people just standing around. It's capturing that one person's response, their emotion, whatever is happening on their face, just capturing that moment instead
Hmm.
of just a group of five people just standing around.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So
So I intentionally scope out moments versus just taking shots.
that's
So
smart. That's smart.
okay.
Now you said there that training a second photographer to kind
Hmm.
of see those moments is very difficult,
Very.
and that we're definitely going to be talking a lot about second shooters
Hmm.
here. But in just one sentence, can you tell me what is the job description of a second shooter?
A second shooter is, in my opinion, someone who can come in and provide supplemental images to mine. Maybe miss some of those images that I miss, or miss some angles, or capture some angles that I may miss. I think that's the biggest importance of a second shooter
Mhm.
when it comes to weddings.
Yeah, so they are shooting. They're there with
Hmm.
you on the wedding day as a second set of eyes.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha,
Yes.
gotcha.
Seeing that moment from a different perspective.
Right.
Yes.
So when it comes to second shooting, one thing that I anticipate people potentially asking is who is second shooting for, and why not just go off and start on your own as being the main photographer?
Um, well, at the beginning, I did do a lot of shooting by myself.
Hmm.
And what I noticed was there was a lot of anxiety of not being able to capture every single thing. Every wedding is different, and you never know what you're going to run into once you get there. So
Yeah.
there is a little bit of comfort of having someone else there to, capture a few other images or help you with the dress or help with other aspects. That is the benefit of having a second shooter, if
Hmm.
that makes sense.
No, it does make sense. It does make sense. But I'm thinking if somebody's listening right now and they
Hmm.
love photography, right?
Okay.
And they're thinking, I want to go off and I want to shoot weddings.
Yeah.
Now, a little, I guess, a little bit of insight to the audience is that there's a lot of listeners who do have a 9 to 5 job,
Yes.
or maybe they don't have the time freedom or
Hmm.
even the desire to go off and shoot weddings full time on their own. Maybe their job has excellent benefits. Whatever it
Yes.
is. Uh, would you say that second shooting is perfect for them, or is second shooting perfect for the person who one day wants to be the main photographer? Can you kind of walk me through that? I guess that wasn't really that great of a
No,
question.
I completely understand. I think it could be either. I think for some people they don't like the business end. They
Hmm.
just want to shoot. They don't want to deal with, booking or accounting or any of that. They want to shoot. Second shooting would be perfect for that person. Second shooting would also be perfect for someone who's wanting to learn the business and learn how to shoot a wedding.
Hmm.
So I think it would work for each person. But I think that's something that you'd have to be honest about, know exactly where you want to be, and I think you should be honest with the lead photographer about what your goals are.
Ah, interesting. As the second photographer, that
Hmm.
makes sense. That makes sense. We're kind of in this industry where a lot of people, since art is so subjective, it's hard to be what's the right word? It's hard to be critical of your own work, because being critical of your own work changes depending on how you view it, and I guess your confidence, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So I've met, multiple photographers over the years. Some of them have very little technical skill but high
Hmm.
confidence. And
Yeah.
some of them have high technical skill but low confidence, and they would
Right.
rate their abilities as about equal, right?
Yeah.
So for you as the main photographer, what have been some of the biggest challenges of finding a second shooter?
That's a good one. I'd say finding someone that is dependable is one of the biggest issues.
Hmm.
When I look for a second photographer, I'm looking for someone to use long term, and there are certain reasons why I'm looking for someone to use long term. But I look for someone long term, and usually not someone just for one wedding or just for one event. So finding someone who's constantly going to show up on time and have their equipment and have what they need and know what they need to do, that I think that is something that's very difficult, and that's been very difficult to find. After that, I would say finding someone whose shooting style matches mine.
Hmm.
Um, and that's something that I can teach or something that I can work with. I just need them to be really dependable.
Yeah,
I need to know that, if the bride is in one place and the groom is in another place, that they're going to show up when they're supposed to.
it's pretty important. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very important. Um, After that, I'd say technical skill, which is something that could be taught. The other thing that's really important for me is someone who's able to capture those moments that I want them to be able to capture, um, in a certain perspective, and someone who understands how to, um, you know, ca- capture a shot.
Hmm.
Um, and so I think that can be a little challenging as well. That's
Challenging
about
as
it.
far as finding a person who you are confident is able to find that, or challenging in teaching somebody how to do that?
Well, I think that's something that's I think it's really difficult to teach someone how to compose a shot
Hmm.
and to know what to shoot and how to shoot it. The thing with a second shooter is I'm paying you to come and work along with me.
Yeah.
So it's easier if I have someone that I'm mentoring with me or someone who's volunteering to come along and they can walk along and see exactly what I'm shooting versus someone that I'm paying and I have to mentor you at the same moment.
Right.
So that is a challenge. And that's very difficult because if I'm mentoring you during that time, then you're capturing the same images that I'm capturing.
Exactly.
So, um, which means I have to have another photographer that I'm bringing on.
A
So that's
second
another
second
thing.
shooter.
Yeah. So that's another thing for, um, I guess, aspiring second shooters to know is, to be honest with what your skill level is. If you know that you're not very skilled, then maybe you go out and shadow, or maybe you go out and assist and help, um, versus offering to second shoot.
Hmm. So, one of the questions that I've been asked multiple times is, how do I start second shooting? And it seems as though the way that most beginners go about it is they just send out emails to every,
Hmm.
they'll search for Dallas wedding photographer, and whoever's on that first page, they're just going to send them out an email and say,
Right.
hey, can I go with you to a wedding and shoot with you?
Hmm.
And inevitably they get next to no response.
Right.
So when it
Right.
comes to second shooters, are you actively looking for second shooters or are they coming to you?
I'm usually actively looking for them.
Hmm. Okay, so then follow up question: where are you actively looking for them?
Oh goodness. I have Facebook groups. There's networking events that I go to. And then also, as I look through Instagram and social media, if I run across a photographer, images that have just really caught my eye, I may reach out to them and see if
Hmm.
they're open to second shooting.
Hmm. Hmm.
But one thing I would say about the networking and events and the Facebook events, I think those are very good opportunities for a beginner to go in and network and meet people and maybe invite a photographer out to lunch or out for coffee just to talk. If
Yeah.
you're at a networking event, you run across a photographer and you talk, and it seems to be some sort of chemistry there, and maybe ask them out for lunch or for coffee, and just kind of pick their brain or ask questions. For me, I think it's more important for a beginner to offer something before asking.
Hmm.
So if you offer um, to come out and help with the bags or with lighting, I think you'll get a better response versus asking for someone to hire you
Sure.
or yeah.
And mentor
So
you
offer,
while
yeah,
being
offers
paid.
offer
Yeah.
something versus asking for
Yeah, it's one of those. It is tough. It is tough because a lot of listeners have a family and they don't really want to give up weekends so much, but they do want to dip their toes in
something.
shooting weddings,
Yeah,
and being paid to shoot weddings is a good reason, or I don't know, reason to be away from the family for the
oh
weekend.
oh
And
yeah.
if you're not getting paid, then that does make it a little harder.
It
But
is.
when it comes to the point to where a photographer, you've reached out to a photographer, or they've
Hmm.
reached out to you and said like, "Hey, can I just follow you to a wedding?"
Hmm.
They go to the wedding. That next step is bringing them on as a second shooter. So that's when we get into the pay. So,
Okay.
how do you pay a second shooter? Hey, Raymond here, and if you're listening to this, you are listening to the free version of today's interview. If you want to hear more from today's guest about the business of photography, consider becoming a premium member. Every week, guests answer questions about products, pricing, packages, and so much more that will help your growing photography business thrive. This is the next logical step. To join, head over to beginnerphotographypodcast.com and click the premium membership button at the top of the page.
Yeah.
So that leads me directly into this next question,
Oh,
which
okay.
is, does the second shooter edit their own photos, or is it the job of the primary photographer?
I think it's the job of the primary photographer because I would think that you would want the gallery of images to look very cohesive, look very similar, have a very similar editing style. So for me, I would prefer to take raw images
Hmm.
and edit them with my own.
So how do you handle that? How do you handle that at the end of a wedding day? Do they just hand over cards, or do you prefer them upload photos for you to download?
My preference is as is to take a card. I would give them a card.
Hmm.
Hopefully they have a dual slot. And then I would take that card with me so that I'm in possession of the images at the end of the night. So, I've had cases where the second photographer hadn't uploaded all of the photos.
Oh.
Some of them have gone missing and, you know,
I
stolen.
this is completely unrelated, but I worked with another photographer as a favor, and she was from out of town, the main photographer, but she was
Mhm.
traveling back because she's from here originally, and she was shooting the wedding of a friend who she grew up with, and she was looking for a second who was here local, and she knew me, so she reached out and asked if I would second with her, and I said, yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. I was really excited to do so because I hadn't shot with this photographer before. So at the end of the day, I said, do you want me to give you cards or just upload them? And she was just like, just upload them. I'll give you my Dropbox. Um, or, no, I don't remember if she gave me the Dropbox. Oh, no. I'm sorry. It was Google Drive. It was Google Drive. So she just said, upload them to Google Drive, send me the link, I'll download them, and then we'll be good. And I said, fantastic. So that's what I did. I came home. I took all the raw photos. I put them on
Mhm.
Google Drive. I had to pay for like a terabyte of storage
Yeah.
just for a little bit to upload all these photos.
Right.
I sent her the link, and then um, and then right away, I got the response. Perfect. Thank you so much. Like this is
Okay.
great. I kept that link up for probably 6 months,
Mhm.
and then I was like, it's already done. It's all good. 6 months. I went ahead and deleted that folder off of the Google Drive because
Okay.
it had been 6 months since the
Yeah.
wedding had happened. Um, and 2 months after that, I get an email that's like, "Hey, where are those photos? I'm ready to edit that wedding, and I can't
Oh my
get those
gosh.
photos." And that was my response. I was like, "Oh no! Like this is
Yeah.
well, they're gone.
Yeah.
I don't have
Yeah.
those images anymore because
Yeah.
they were, and that's kind of the problem. So that's just like a word to the wise for those listening, right? Like
Mhm.
if you're ever in that situation, maybe just send out an email or a text before you delete all those photos, and which is what I should have done. It's what I should have
Yeah.
done. I just assumed that after 6 months that the photos had been downloaded, edited, delivered, and then no longer needed by
Yeah,
the
and that's
primary
scary.
photographer.
And some I will give out my login for Dropbox and
Mm-hmm.
let photographers just upload, so we won't have to deal with that sharing folder thing. And some of my second photographers will back up my images as well in a separate location.
Yeah,
But giving them my Dropbox has worked. They can upload images. I don't have to worry about that. Because I know that can be really, really scary. And the thing with Dropbox is if you have a business account, if you accidentally delete something, you can go back and get it for, I believe, a year.
oh wow,
Yeah,
wow.
they have it in this hidden deleted folder section, and you can go back and retrieve deleted images. So that's
That
something
is a
good to
great
know.
feature.
Yeah.
For that exact reason. For that exact reason.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's something that's really good to know. One thing I did want to talk about was my personal experience with second photographers. I do have one photographer that I've been working with for about 4 years, and then another photographer that I've been working with for about 3 years. I really like to use the same second photographer. There have been, cases where I hadn't been feeling too well, or my kids got sick, or a piece of equipment has failed,
Hmm.
and that second photographer, because we work so well together, and she knows exactly how I work, she can kind of fill in without any gaps.
Yeah.
And so that has made things so much easier for me, because we never know when an emergency is going to happen.
Very true.
You never know when, I was in the middle of a wedding, and um, my mirror got stuck,
Oh,
so I
on the
couldn't.
camera.
Yeah, the camera. And so, with working with someone you're very familiar with, all you have to do is go, "Since I'm the camera, can you take over for a second?" And that person can shoot the images that you want them to shoot. But if you bring someone in every time it's new, and you're continuously working with these new people, then it's really hard to do that.
Yeah.
It's really a challenge. So I've just, over the time period that I've become a wedding photographer, I've had some issues, and things happen, and sometimes the weddings don't go as planned. But if you have someone that knows what the end goal and end result is, then it makes it a lot easier.
So speaking of that end result, then, are you having are you teaching your second shooters what shots that they need to be looking out for? Do you have a shot list, or is it we're gonna go in, we're gonna look for the best moments, and whatever happens, happens?
Well, as far as shot list, I have shot lists as far as family shots mainly,
Hmm.
or unless it's something that the couple specifically, request.
Sure.
But what I will do when I'm bringing on a second photographer, I will send them a gallery of images, a full gallery, so that they understand the type of shots that I'm looking to capture. That has been very helpful. If the second photographer actually looks at it. But
Of
that has
course,
been
yeah.
very that has been very helpful. And at times when I'm working with more of an assistant or mentor, I will take them and say, this is the shot that I would prefer. This is the angle that I would prefer, and here's why.
Hmm.
So yes, that is something that I go through. But at the beginning, I will send over a gallery of images so that they understand what the capture.
So when you reached out to me and sent me that first email, you
Yeah.
sent me a Beyonce song lyric. Can you share with me real quickly what that lyric was?
Oh, it was oh goodness.
Whatever she lacks.
Yes, whatever she lacks, she's right over my shoulder. And it's Beyonce and Jay-Z. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that right there, I think, when we're talking about second shooting, is solid,
Yeah.
solid, solid,
Yeah.
solid. But I think a question that many second shooters might have is, and you kind of brought it up there, is if somebody's just shooting, if we're taking it literally, directly over your shoulder as the main photographer,
Mhm.
are they just getting the same photos? And if so, is that what you want, or do you have them go and look for something different?
No, we get different angles. We happens if there's an emergency, if something breaks, then that person can just step in and just take over seamlessly. So no, we don't really get, I would say as a team, we don't really get the same angles, the same shots. If I'm not there, then she knows exactly what shot that I would take.
Has there ever been a situation where you specifically had to tell another photographer, like, no, go over there and get this exact thing, this or this other thing, because I'm right here shooting. You're kind of in the wrong spot. Like, how do you deal with difficult situations with the second photographer if they're not doing what you had hoped that they would be?
Well, usually if I'm working with someone for the first time, I will tell them exactly where to stand and which lens I would prefer for them to use. And I'm hoping that I'm not being too bossy. So, and for a second shooter, I think if you're being told what to do, I definitely don't take it personal.
Hmm.
But yeah, I will tell them where to go, what angle I would want them to shoot from. Usually the way I do it is I'll ask them to take a shot from this particular, that whatever particular angle, and then I'll explain why I like that shot. So that's helpful.
Oh, gotcha. So
Yeah.
that they know what the intention is behind
Yeah.
the photo that you want them
Yeah.
to take.
Yeah.
I love it. Okay, I love that. That's very smart. I would just be like, go over there,
Yeah.
get it, get that.
Move over.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
wouldn't. I wouldn't.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be
Well,
very.
sometimes, I had one case where I would tell her what to get and she just wouldn't, just kind of did her own thing. And so, of course, that's someone I didn't work with again. But it didn't work. But
Huh.
there are some intentional shots that I do like and I do try to direct.
Hmm. Hmm.
But
So when it comes to having a second shooter, as you just said, sometimes they don't work out. Sometimes they're not what it is that you're looking for,
mhm,
and other times you'll work with them for 4+ years. You know.
yeah.
So what would you say is the difference between a good second shooter and a great second shooter?
Oh goodness, that's a good one. A good second shooter will ask questions. Is not afraid to ask questions. A great second shooter will ask questions. A great second shooter will go in and take charge, take the lead, take plenty of shots, even if she's unsure if you need that shot, just to make sure that you have it if you want it. Um, you know, a great second shooter will take direction well.
Hmm.
When you ask them to do something, they'll do it. They don't mind doing it. If you ask them to do something as simple as holding a light stand, they're happy to do it. They're more of a go getter. That makes a great second shooter. Just the average second shooter, I think, would just kind of sit around and wait for you to tell them exactly what to do instead of just taking charge.
Hmm.
Um, you know, a a good second shooter would probably, I think all of mine are great. So
Yeah.
I
It's
think,
hard to
but
talk about the
I
ones that
think a
aren't
good
good.
second shooter would just be someone who doesn't have an idea of what it is that you're looking for, and
Uh-huh.
that person hasn't researched what you're looking for, or hasn't asked those questions, or didn't look at the gallery of images that you were needing, or too timid to step in and get that good shot, or ask the groom to, straighten his bow tie or that sort of thing. So the great second shooter is going to be really on top of things, you know,
You can
really
tell that
goes
they
over
have that
it.
passion, that
Yeah,
they're ready for it.
yeah, yeah. And someone who isn't who's humble enough to take direction,
Hmm.
and also understand that they are working for you, and this is your client. Um, the other thing that I want to touch on is being respectful. Weddings can be difficult. Sometimes the family is difficult, but you have to realize it's not your wedding. So as a
Yeah.
second shooter, you got to come in, you got to be respectful, got to laugh. Don't take anything too serious. If the uncle's, you know, making weird jokes, just kind of laugh it off and just keep doing your job. That's something that's very important as well.
Yeah, I feel like that's probably what's holding me back, I think, most when it comes to actively looking for a
Okay.
second shooter.
Hmm.
And that's just because I've worked with, various second shooters, and some have been really good and then moved away to Amsterdam, and then some
Yeah.
of them have not been so good,
Yeah.
and then it just didn't work out. But the ones that aren't so good seem to not, I don't want to say they don't have the personality, but like you said, sometimes there's a situation where like there's a little bit of family drama,
Hmm.
you know, and they will try to comment on it, like, "Hey, well,
Oh
what
yeah.
if we just?" And it's like, nope, this is not, this is not our place.
Yeah.
And now
Yeah.
you commenting is a reflection of me commenting on this, and I
Yeah.
don't want any part of this.
Yeah.
Just smile and say, whatever
Exactly.
happens, happens. We'll try to make this work.
Yeah.
This isn't my family. I'm not going to get into any of this drama.
Right.
And I think that it's finding that line, which is really, really difficult for new photographers. You know what I mean?
It is.
Um, so that is, I don't know. I guess I didn't have a question there
Well,
for you.
speaking of that, one thing that I do like, and that I tell the, associates or new second shooter, you know, is when you go in, offer um, to be of some help. The bride's in there getting dressed and they're struggling with the zipper, maybe offer to help,
Hmm.
or maybe tell her mother that she looks nice. She looks pretty. You love her dress, or that sort of thing, or be friendly. Um, but definitely not be critical. Just don't say anything.
There
Yeah,
you
just
go.
don't say anything, but
Yeah.
definitely offer, um, compliments and encouragement.
Hmm.
That's what weddings are about. And so that's what I encourage my second shooters to do. Even in a difficult situation, sometimes we'll address it with humor instead of being overly critical. So
Of
there was
course.
this one case where, um, my second shooter, she had taken the groom's suits to take some photos of it, and it was completely wrinkled. And so she called me over. She said, "What should I do? Should I go say something?" And so what I did was I went in and I made a joke. The guys were in the room. And I said, "Guys, you can't walk down the aisle with wrinkled with a wrinkled tux." And so they just kind of looked at me. I said, "What?" I said, "Did you guys you know take your tuxes to the dry cleaner?" And they just looked at me, all of them. I said, "Well, let me check." So that tells me there. So I went and looked, and I would say most of their shirts were just wrinkled. They were just kind of thrown in those little garment bags. And,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so I said, "Guys, I'm going to bring the steamer in. I need you guys to steam so you can look nice and handsome for the wedding." And so, it turned into a joke. And
Hmm.
then by the time I left the room, they were laughing. So, when I could have gone in and been really critical, and I think that would have just set a different tone, or she could have gone in and said something pretty mean, which could have set the tone for the wedding.
Of course, of
So,
course. Yeah.
um,
And that is a fine line because as a paid professional, you do want to be helpful and you do want to make sure that they look their best.
yeah,
But, sometimes that doesn't mean helping, put up the altar,
yeah,
or like hanging extra
yeah,
flowers.
yeah,
Sometimes those are things that the family needs to take care of.
Yeah.
Because you do still have a job that you need to worry about.
That's true.
Now, when it comes with the bride and the groom looking the best that they can look, yeah, I'm going to make that same comment. Like, what are you guys doing here? Come on. We need a steamer in here. But when it comes to, helping put up, I don't know, flyers or banners or signs or something like that, I'm not going to offer.
Oh, no.
I'm not going to do that.
No.
I'm not going to do that. So that's interesting. Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that. That's really something that needs to be learned through experience and really can't be taught through a book, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, help here, don't help here.
Yeah.
Do this thing, don't do that thing.
Yeah.
That's really
and you don't want to make anyone feel awkward or weird during their wedding.
Oh, yeah, no.
It's already a stressful moment. So when you go in there, you can, tell a joke or offer to some sort of assistance or compliment or something to kind of ease the nerves, and it makes it a little easier, and also having a more calm demeanor versus a more arrogant demeanor. I've seen some wedding photographers that are really good wedding photographers, but they're very arrogant, and they make the room tense.
Yeah.
Any room tense. And so, I feel like that's not our job. Our job is to be there and to be of some assistance and to make sure you have a great wedding photos.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. What do you think is a misconception or something that somebody would be surprised about to learn about specifically about being a second shooter?
I think some second shooters believe that they don't have to be assertive. I think that they feel that they can just kind of hide behind the lead shooter and just kind of do whatever that person does, and not really take
as
take
if they're
the
like
lead.
an insurance policy.
Yeah. And I think that's completely false. I think both jobs are very important, and I think it makes the lead shooter's job very difficult if they have to babysit someone. And constantly tell someone where to be and where to go and what to do, and all that. I think that can be very challenging. So, and at the end of the day, if you as a second shooter, if you take 2,000 images, I mean that's not maybe not ideal, but it's not horrible. But if you don't take the right images, or if you don't take enough images, I think that's the worst case scenario. So
Sure.
that's why I say go in, shoot away, do everything that you can, just work your butt off, and I think it'll pay off.
And let's have cake at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Always have cake.
Oh man, last night I had a wedding, and the cake, I don't know what was up with the cake, but it tasted just like pina colada. I mean, it was like coconut, it was pineapple.
Really?
It was so delicious. And
Wow.
then at the end of the night, the couple were like, oh, did you eat? Did you have cake? And I said, yeah, of course I had cake. And she was like, what one did you have? And I said, I think it was pina colada flavored. And they both looked at me like, what are you talking about? And I was like, it was kind of coconutty, a little pineapple-y. And they both looked at each other. They had no idea what I was talking about. So I don't know if the cake baker, they asked it. They were like, do you mean pistachio? And I said, no, this was definitely not pistachio. So I don't know if the cake baker screwed something up, but whatever happened, it was amazing.
Really
and there was
good.
no complaints. So
I always taste a piece of cake at every wedding.
Yeah, you have to. Have to. I mean, what other job lets you eat cake every day that you go to work? Yeah.
None.
It's the best job in the world. Fantastic. Well, Misha, I want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing everything that you did, obviously about second shooting, even part of the business side of second shooting and how to get into that. Before I let you go, can you share with the listeners where they can find you online and just learn more about you and check out your photography?
Yeah, I'm located in Dallas, but we travel everywhere for weddings. Um, my website is www.lavishlylux.com. I can be found on Instagram at lavishlylux.com or lavishlylux. Also on Facebook and Twitter. I also have a mentoring program that you can read all about on my website. Again, www.lavishlylux.com.
How do you find Twitter works for you as a wedding photographer? I've always been fascinated by that.
It doesn't. It doesn't work.
So why are you still there?
I don't know. I connect with other professionals.
Oh, okay, I see.
Twitter. Other than that,
yeah,
no benefit.
I
love Instagram. Instagram has been great.
That's the spot.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, again, Misha, thank you so much for sharing everything. And I look forward to keeping up with you in the future and seeing everything that you got going on. So thank you again.
Thanks.
Woo-wee! That was jam-packed full of great stuff. And my biggest takeaway was just simply how easy Misha made the whole thing. You know, we as photographers tend to, overcomplicate things. And she broke it down super simple. I mean, her tip of sending a new second shooter a full gallery from another wedding just to get a sense of the style and where they should be shooting from was just great stuff. Super simple, you know? No need to bring somebody in and have a long training day before a wedding day, you know? And that was just great. So I want to know what your biggest takeaway is from this interview with Misha. I've actually added her into the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group, and I would be willing to bet that she would love to hear from you and to hear, you saying thanks for coming on the show. So that is it for this week. I want you to join me next week when we talk about the future of editing and using artificial intelligence to speed up the editing process. It is good. So until then, get out, keep shooting, stay safe, and focus on yourself. I love you all.
If you enjoyed today's podcast, please leave us a review in iTunes or your favorite podcast player. And continue the conversation with Raymond and other listeners of the podcast by joining the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group today. Thank you. We'll see you again next week.